Super Meat Boy Forever will be delayed again, with publisher Team Meat tweeting, "We are almost done, but not quite there yet." Originally slated for an April 20, 2019 release, the sequel to the 2010 Super Meat Boy was first announced in 2013, followed by a Nintendo Switch review in 2017. The game was originally planned as a mobile title before development was restarted and turned into a follow-up. We have been knocking out the last bits of Super Meat Boy Forever at record speeds while keeping a healthy and sustainable pace. We are going to keep that pace, which means we will not hit our April 20, 2019 release. Sorry about that. The note reads, "We could have sacrificed our minds, bodies and social lives to make April 20, 2019. But that's stupid." The note continues, "Team Meat is not some studio owned by any outside corporation that has say over what we'll do and how we'll do it. We are fortunate enough to have control over how we work and we choose not to run ourselves into the ground. We are almost done, but not quite there yet." Pic. Twitter. COM7Q10XD0N. The enormity of the tragedy in New Zealand, a terrorist attack perpetrated by a white supremacist and Islamophobe, touched so many people around the world. My Muslim students, as well as several friends and colleagues who include Muslim Aussies and Kiwis that have contributed mightily to both nations in the game scene, were shattered and fearful about what comes next. My own grave, civil as it was a mere echo of those who were ringing across the Tasman or the Pacific to learn whether their loved ones were swept up in the catastrophe, one that saw 0.1% of New Zealand's Muslim population slaughtered at a stroke. Already, necessarily painful discussions have begun about the role played by social media sites in amplifying, organizing, and radicalizing voices like the terrorists, after and including facilitating the proliferation of his live stream of the attack, which some commentators liken to the first-person shooter perspective of the slaughter. The comparison was, unfortunately, apt. The response from some was as wearisome as it was predictable. In the United Kingdom, Daily Mail's quest to absolve the extreme right of any responsibility for the Christchurch terrorist attack, the perpetrator was framed as a bullied loner who lost himself to violent video games. Such framings, though bereft of conscience, are familiar. It has been the excuse employed by countless malefactors in martyrdom and fan communities, likening the shared nerd experience of childhood bullying to any criticism leveled at their adulthood hobbies, even when such critics come from other hobbyists who also suffered as children. Such framings are also familiar for their willingness to blame anything but ideology for the attack. One need only look to the Columbine High School mass shooting, which became the archetypal American school shooting for a whole generation and was perpetrated by young men with Nazi sympathies, who chose Hitler's birthday for their crime. Instead of dwelling on that fact, everything else under the sun was blamed in the onslaught of their novel 24-hour rolling news coverage. Marilyn Manson, neglectful parenting, school bullying, and, of course, violent video games. For the moment, at least, the Daily Mail's attempt to resurrect these narratives has been met with stentorian condemnation from all quarters, even if some Australian politicians, eager to take the spotlight off their own Islamophobic policies and rhetoric, are still trying to make facts happen. But that does not mean that the gaming industry is absolved of the need for any internal conversation. Last year, podcast Luke Winkie reported on the long-running internal struggle of Paradox Interactive to deal with the fact that its signature Crusader King series has attracted a lot of angry young white men who want to actually bring back the Crusades. This included a slew of racist mods, only a few of which were banned. As to the rest, well, the makers of these games are aware of the issues but have so far exercised a fairly light touch, partially as a matter of resources and partially as a strategic way to avoid giving extra attention to the worst in their community. Hearts of Iron 5 game director Dad Lind told me that in 99 out of 100 cases, Paradox will not squash out mods for objectionable content. Among the most popular, in very relative terms, it was downloaded fewer than 10,000 times as of Kotaku's report, is one whose name echoes a meme, beloved of white nationalists in nerd spaces. Deus Vult, Latin for God wills it. It became a chant at the Charlottesville white supremacist rally, which culminated in another terrorist attack. The meme also appeared in the Christchurch Shooters Manifesto. While the turgid screed is filled with churlish misdirection, too many people mistake that sort of thing for the insincerity it pantomimes rather than mere insubstance. Given what he actually did, it's not unreasonable to cite his use of a racist crusade meme, beloved of a few particularly bigoted gamers, as exemplifying his actual beliefs. The use of irony in the manifesto should be treated with analytic caution, but the text is a testimony to his convictions, as surely as the many references he painted on his gun. We do not yet know what his current relationship to game communities was, but we know he chose to post his manifesto to 8chan, the same hotbed of extremism and child porn that recently attracted attention because THQ Nordic held anonymity for edginess' sake. Presumably, shout out to Mark. The site became a hotbed of gamergate organizing when the harassment campaign was banished from 4chan, and was a source for the white nationalist activist Milo Yiannopoulos' Breitbart editorials. One might wish to quibble and say that this is no more an indictment than the terrorist posting to Twitter or Facebook, but the tenor of his post to 8chan was one of speaking to a friendly audience. To his people, the intent was clearly different. A fond farewell to his fellow travelers, a what pauses for fondness in communities steeped in fear of our better angels. THQ Nordic's decision to host Dan Noma in this suspect was patently irresponsible back in February. In the aftermath of Christchurch, we have received a terrible reminder of why we should be absolutely frightened that any gaming studio would want to cut such people. Speaking to Kotaku, Hearts of Iron 5 game director Dad Lind told Glukwinky that a zero-tolerance approach makes martyrs in a community that has shown itself very able to mobilize petty grievances and overwhelm the conversation. Be that as it may, we have had too many examples of how containment fails as community moderation, whether it's Reddit's toxic subreddits, or eking out onto the rest of the internet, or Crusader Kings memes appearing in the ranks of white supremacist terrorists. It's clear that this approach is not working. The game community did not create this problem, nor will a tougher approach in gaming spaces alone solve it. But that's no reason not to take responsibility for what we can do to address this problem. I would rather a zero-tolerance moderation approach make internet martyrs of angry men who are pissed about their inability to use other people's platforms to spread hate than I would such people making actual martyrs out of 3-year-olds in a house of worship any day of the week. Even now, there are people arguing similar things about the attention given to the Christchurch terrorists' manifesto, that it gives him what he wants, that he sought to fuel the culture wars, cause division and so forth. Thus we must pretend he was merely an apolitical madman. Such people rarely address the bigotry that causes actual division and actually claims lives. However, ignoring these bigots is not the same as marginalizing them, and it is the latter which must be done by robbing them and their kin of platforms that allow their propaganda to spread without rebuttal, but merely citing their agitprop as evidence to illustrate that these people are of a certain ilk, before applying social sanction in response. That's hardly the same thing. Ignoring them is passive, marginalizing them is active. The ban button is not all-powerful, but it is your way of saying, hate does not belong here, even if it simply goes somewhere else.